This is BBC News. I'm Samantha Simmons. Our top stories. International inspectors have finally been able to collect samples from Douma in Syria, where it's thought chemical weapons were used 2 weeks ago. Kim Jong-un suspends all North Korea's nuclear and missile tests ahead of talks next week. And the funeral for the former First Lady of the United States, Barbara Bush, has been held in Houston, Texas. Her son, Jeb Bush, described how he had asked her if she was ready to die.
Without missing a beat, she said, "Jeb, I believe in Jesus, and he is my Savior. I don't want to leave your dad, but I know I'll be in a beautiful place."
Hello and welcome to BBC News. Chemical weapons inspectors in Syria have finally managed to visit the site of the suspected chemical attack in Douma. Their mission has been postponed several times over the past week. The alleged attack took place on the 7th of April. Local medics say it left at least 40 people dead. Well, these are just some of the images uploaded online which shocked the international community, said to show victims of the attack, among them, as you can see, a number of children. Medics in Douma report people foaming at the mouth with pinpoint pupils and difficulty breathing. A week later, on the 14th of April, the US, UK and France carried out missile strikes on a number of Syrian military sites in retaliation. That same day, the OPCW chemical weapons team was in Damascus and hoping to visit the part of Douma where chemical weapons were said to have been used. Then, 4 days later, 18th of April, the UN security team is fired upon while trying to visit the site of the alleged attack ahead of the OPCW inspectors. The following day, the US say they have credible information that Russia and Syria are trying to sanitize places where chemical weapons were used while denying inspectors access to the area. Russia accuses Syrian rebels of preventing the OPCW visiting the site. And today, the inspection team finally got to visit Douma and collected samples from the alleged site of the attack. Well, Angela Kane is a former chemical weapons inspector and was in charge of the investigation in Syria in 2013. She says the delay of 2 weeks to the OPCW investigation does affect the chances of it being looked into properly.
It is, of course, very much a concern. 2 weeks have passed since the attack on Douma, and not only have 2 weeks passed, but there have been a number of movements there, meaning that the government has retaken control of that area. The government has also bussed out a large number of people out of Douma, evacuated them, and I don't know if the number is hundreds or if it's even more than 1,000, but I understand there were 90 buses filled with people who were taken out. Those were people who had been affected by the attack, who could have been interviewed. They were first responders, they were victims. So if they are no longer available for interviews and also for taking samples, I think that is very much of a concern.
Are the OPCW still going to be able to come to some kind of determination about whether or not there was a chemical weapons attack there?
I think from what we know is that there was a chemical weapons attack, but of course it depends on what kind of an attack was it. If it was a chlorine bomb attack, it is much harder to have any evidence at this point in time. 2 weeks afterwards, chlorine evaporates very quickly. It does not remain in the bodies. It does not remain in the soil. So it'll be very difficult to find conclusive proof that it was a chlorine attack. If, however, another substance was used, a sarin-like substance or a sarin derivative, that stays much longer in the body, it stays much longer in the environment. So I would imagine that samples could still be found. However, as I have said, if many people have been evacuated and no longer available for interviews, for taking samples, for showing the inspectors evidence that happened when the bombs came down, that I think is very much a concern, because the government has had access to this territory for quite a number of days and could therefore also have obliterated any traces of the attack.
You were responsible for the investigation of alleged chemical weapons use in Syria in 2013, which supposedly resulted in Syria's destruction of its chemical stocks. If sarin or chlorine is found in this site in Douma by the OPCW, in your assessment, could it only have been Syria behind the use of those?
Well, chlorine, as you know, is a openly available substance. It is used in water purification and in private and commercial use. So it depends on how much chlorine was used, and if it was used as a weapon, then definitely it is against the Chemical Weapons Convention. However, it has also in the last couple of days come to light that Syria destroyed, after it acceded to the Chemical Weapons Convention, some 133 tons of isopropanol. And isopropanol, again, is a chemical that is being used in commercial uses in acetone and so forth. But on the other hand, it can also be used as a precursor to sarin. And while Syria destroyed that 133 or had destroyed 133 tons of isopropanol, they also imported 96 tons of isopropanol between 2014 and 2016. Now, that has only recently come to light, and I find that very surprising, because why would they import such a large quantity of isopropanol, which, yes, is for commercial use, but also could be used as a precursor of sarin? Those, I think, raise questions that need to be answered by the Syrian government.
And if they refuse to answer them, what should happen?
Well, as you know, the OPCW makes a report once a month to the Security Council, and this report is being looked at by the Security Council members. It is discussed at great length. It has a lot of information. The last meeting was in early April, but as I said, it takes place every single month, and all of the questions that are still open are being aired in these discussions and are being raised with the government. But I do believe that this recent importation of the isopropanol has only come to light this week, at least that is my understanding, and so therefore this question was not raised, that I know for sure, in the early April consultation in the Security Council.
Authorities in Saudi Arabia have firmly denied any major security breach after reports of gunfire near the royal palaces in Riyadh. State media said a small unauthorized drone was shot down at around 7:50 local time and that King Salman was not at his palace at the time. Authorities are now investigating the incident. North Korea's announcement that it's suspending its nuclear missile tests has been given a broadly positive response. President Trump tweeted it was big progress, but Russia and Japan in particular have been more cautious. Kim Jong-un says he's stopping the tests because he's completed his goal of developing nuclear weapons. From Seoul, Laura Bicker reports.
North Korea's favourite news anchor is back. Usually the famous Ri Chun-hee would be announcing the state's latest missile test, but today was different. Kim Jong-un has declared there will be no more nuclear or ballistic missile tests. He's also going to shut down an atomic test site to focus on building North Korea's economy. In a tweet, the US president said this is very good news for North Korea and the world. Big progress. Look forward to our summit.
Today, I believe in North Korea, the path is open for the peaceful denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And it also proves that diplomacy is the way to solve conflicts. It's not war.
Others were more guarded.
What's important is whether this move will lead to complete, verifiable and irreversible abandonment of North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. We'll have to watch it closely.
These students have defected from North to South Korea. They are sceptical of their former leader's claims.
There are 3 nuclear facilities, and they're only closing 1. It's just to show action, to negotiate with the US. It doesn't mean they're going to give up their nuclear weapons. To develop nuclear weapons, they've killed tens of thousands of people by starving them. I think North Korea is trying to get a reward because they've been pressured by sanctions.
In Seoul, a hotline has been set up to Pyongyang to allow the leaders of the divided peninsula to talk to one another. They're welcoming this latest news from the north, ahead of a summit meeting between the two sides next week. It's worth noting what Kim Jong-un did not say. He's not handing over his nuclear weapons. He's simply going to stop testing them. This is not denuclearization as ordered by the United States. Nevertheless, it is a significant step.
It really signals he's all in, and we need to catch up, I think, in terms of our analysis of where Kim Jong-un is. He's ready for the summit with the South Koreans, for the summit with Donald Trump. It's a measure of his seriousness that he's doing this before the meetings.
Pyongyang has broken nearly every promise it has made to the international community. But there is some hope that this time, maybe, it will be different. Laura Bicker, BBC News, Seoul.
Well, earlier I spoke to Joel Witt, who worked for 15 years in the US State Department on arms control and non-proliferation. He believes that this move from North Korea is a positive sign.
Well, I agree with people who are saying it's significant, but I don't think we can count all of our chickens before they hatch. No one would have expected Kim Jong-un to make this announcement. And so I think in that context, it's an indicator of the direction the North Koreans are heading in. And on top of that, most people have missed that essentially he's enunciated a new strategic line, which is to declare victory in terms of their development of nuclear weapons and missiles, and now to pivot towards development of his economy. And he knows in order to do that, he's going to need to put his nuclear program on the bargaining table.
Do you think that this is significant progress looking forward to the summit between North and South Korea next week, and then further ahead to the hoped-for summit between North Korea and Washington, or is it all part of the game that must be played to show willingness?
You know, I got to say, I'm getting tired of the media analysis that this is all a game. I've been hearing this since January, and the fact is that everything that's happened since January is another indication that this is a very serious move by North Korea. The issue here now is how do we take advantage of that move? It's not whether it's serious or not. It's how do we take advantage of that move to serve our own interests. That's the main objective here for the United States and for South Korea.
Joel Witt talking to me earlier. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the news. Malaysian officials say the murder of a Palestinian in Kuala Lumpur may have been the work of a foreign intelligence agency. Police say the victim had been shot dead by two men on a motorbike. Palestinian officials identified him as Fadi al-Batsh, an engineering lecturer. American actor Vern Troyer, who is best known for playing Mini-Me in the Austin Powers films, has died at the age of 49. Earlier this month, he was admitted to hospital in Los Angeles, although his team did not say what he was suffering from. Last year, Troyer was hospitalized for alcohol addiction and had been open about his battle with alcoholism. The funeral of Barbara Bush, who died on Tuesday, aged 92, was held today. Her family and friends shared memories of the former First Lady with the 1,500 mourners gathered in Texas to say goodbye. Chris Butler reports.
In the Houston church she attended for most of her life, 4 living presidents gathered with others to pay tribute to Barbara Bush. Among those former heads of state were both her widower and her son. She was described as the rock of what is undoubtedly a political dynasty, but what at its heart was and is a deeply loving family.
My dad is a phenomenal letter writer, and he would write Mom on their wedding anniversaries, which totaled an amazing 73 years. Here's one of them written on January 6, 1994. Will you marry me? Oops, I forgot, we did that 49 years ago. I was very happy on that day in 1945, but I'm even happier today. You have given me joy that few men know. You have made our boys into men by bawling them out and then, right away, by loving them. You've helped Darrell be the sweetest, greatest daughter in the whole wide world. I have climbed perhaps the highest mountain in the world, but even that cannot hold a candle to being Barbara's husband.
During those many decades together, they were seen to support each other. But Barbara Bush was never afraid of making her own political opinions known. As First Lady, she campaigned for literacy and pushed her own liberal views, sometimes bringing her into conflict with others in the Republican Party. But she believed that she and her family could make a difference, and was back on the campaign trail just 2 years ago when her son Jeb ran to be the Republican nominee for president.
She was smart, strong, fun and feisty.
At times her considerable wit could be biting, but warmth along with humour was central in the many stories told about her at this funeral service.
She corresponded for several years with a young girl who named her heifer after Barbara. The child sent frequent updates on the bovine Barbara Bush, which competed in the Houston Rodeo and Livestock Show one year and finished in 8th place. I was sorry for my little friend, Barbara said later, but was slightly relieved, as I am not sure I could have stood the headlines, "Barbara Bush wins the fat stock show."
The current First Lady Melania Trump was among those in attendance, although her husband, the current president, was absent. He said he wasn't attending to avoid extra security being needed at the church. Although the Bush family have had a difficult relationship with Donald Trump, as the often feisty Barbara Bush may have been the first to acknowledge. Her son Jev said he had imagined his mother telling him to keep the service short and not to get weepy. But that proved impossible for many of the families she was so devoted to. Chris Buckler, BBC News.
The funeral of Barbara Bush there. Stay with us on BBC World News. Still to come, a veiled warning from Iran's President Hassan Rouhani says that violence can't promote virtue after a video emerges of morality police violently accosting a woman. This is BBC News. The latest headlines. International inspectors say they visited the Syrian town where it's thought chemical weapons were used 2 weeks ago. North Korea has said it's suspending all nuclear and missile tests with immediate effect. It comes a week before a meeting between leaders from the two Koreas. Promoting virtue will not work through violence. Those were the words of Iranian President Hassan Rouhani earlier today as he appeared to criticize the country's morality police. It follows a viral video of a scuffle involving a morality officer. A warning: you may find the following pictures upsetting. In the video, the officer appears to be assaulting a woman for not covering her head properly with her headscarf. The footage has been widely shared online and has prompted outrage on Iranian social media. A little earlier, I asked women's rights activist Suzanne Tahmasbi what she makes of the president's comments.
I'm glad that he condemned it, even if it was veiled, condemned the violence. But this is not the first time that Rouhani has made statements like this. In fact, he's made statements like this on numerous occasions, including at the time when he was campaigning initially to be elected. He made many promises to women, and one of them was ending violence on the streets and ensuring women's security and their dignity by ending this kind of enforcement. But he's failed consistently to live up to these promises or to these statements, unfortunately.
So why, in your view, do you think he makes them?
Well, I think he makes them because it's the right thing to do and it's expected, and there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the monitoring and control of women's bodies and women's dress, especially on the street, and the violence that women have to face. So he's stepping up to the plate because it's the right thing to do. But I think that he's, you know, in a sense, he's kowtowing to both sides. He's responding to a population that's dissatisfied and it's angry and wants this kind of humiliation and control and violence against women to end. But at the same time, he's not taking any steps to end the morality police and this kind of violence that women face on a daily basis, because he's playing up to conservative supporters of the state or conservative rivals, perhaps even.
There are reports, Susan, that the morality police have been less visible since Rouhani came to power 5 years ago and have perhaps taken a softer line on breaches of the Islamic Code.
Yes, of course. I think that there are reports, and even, you know, even during Ahmadinejad's time, when he stepped up the presence of morality police after the 2009 elections, those morality police were turned into police to arrest protesters, and the controlling and monitoring of women's dress was more relaxed, right? And that has continued during Rouhani's presidency as well, but still it's too much. I think people are fed up with it, and during Khatami's presidency he actually ended the practice of morally policing women and morally policing citizens. So we expect Rouhani to do the same. I think women expect Rouhani to do the same, at least, is to end this practice, but he's failed to do so, even though he promised it in his campaign promises.
Susan Tahmasbi there. Now, in April 1945, after the British Army liberated the Nazi concentration camp at Bergen-Belsen, a BBC reporter interviewed a young Dutch girl who'd been held prisoner there. Hetty Verolom was just 15 years old and had been in Belsen with her two younger brothers for more than a year. Now, more than 7 decades on, she's been back to the camp with the BBC's history programme Witness to listen once again to the interview she gave just days after gaining her freedom.
I passed through the barrier and found myself in the world of a nightmare. The living lay with their heads against corpses, and around them moved the awful ghostly procession of emaciated, aimless people. This is what the Germans did.
If you gave up hope, then within 2 days you were dead. You get used to a lot of things which you think you couldn't get used to. We always were hungry. A half a slice of bread in the morning and a half a slice of bread in the night. 90% of the people were sick with typhus, and that's why we had so many dead. And the dead bodies, in the end, we didn't see them anymore, and we didn't smell them anymore. We were Jewish, that's why we were brought here. When my mother was taken away, my two brothers cried terribly and wouldn't let her go, but I have to be strong for my brothers. We knew the significance of staying alive. If there was danger, if you say shh, they were quiet. They didn't make a sound. When the British came on Sunday, 15th of April, we were very, very happy. We couldn't believe it. They said with a loudspeaker from the truck that we would get food, and it was the next day that in the morning delivered hot tea with sugar in it. And it was the first decent drink we had for weeks. A few days after the liberation, I was interviewed by Patrick Gordon Walker, and he was from the BBC.
Wie heißt du?
Hetty Werkendam.
Und wie alt bist du?
15 Jahre.
Und wie
How
lange
old
bist du
are
in
you?
diesem Lager?
15 years.
And how long have you been in this camp, Belsen?
Sind
14
deine
months.
Eltern mit dir gekommen?
Jawohl.
Did
Und
your parents
sind
come
noch
with
immer
you?
bei dir?
Yes.
And are they still with you?
No. Nein.
This is the area I was interviewed. I was happy to tell him the story. And I wanted to know where my parents were, but he didn't know.
So can you read what it says here, Oma?
Here, I guess 2,500. Many children died in the war, in the Second World War. I hope they rest in peace. We were very lucky. My father and mother and my two brothers and I came back from 3 different concentration camps. I'm sometimes surprised that young people, they don't know what the Holocaust is. And you have to explain it to them. When I'm not there anymore, I hope that somebody will, like you, will remind the world that it did happen. It did happen. Doesn't matter if things are bad and look very dark, you must believe that tomorrow will be a better day.
Hetty Verolom, giving us her story of how she survived Bergen-Belsen and was liberated at the age of 15. That's it from me for now. Don't forget, you can get plenty more detail on all the stories we're covering on our website, bbc.com/news. And you can get in touch with me on Twitter. I'm at Samantha TV News. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Good morning.